What is one of the most common materials you'll come by when you flip the label? Cotton. This should come as no surprise, since cotton makes up about half of all textiles. But how did this come to be? Well folks, it's all thanks to one invention, the cotton gin. In the early 19th century, tobacco had been the main cash crop of the South for the past 2 centuries. But with the rise of the new inventions in the textiles industry, mills in the North, especially New England and Great Britain, had sparked a great demand for cotton. During this time, tobacco profits have been declining due to a decrease in demand and rapid depletion of the soil's nutrients. Many slaves, the cheapest form of labor, were also required to cultivate this highly labor-intensive crop, while wheat was not. So many farmers turned to grow wheat, which held more profit. But why not cotton? Like tobacco, cotton was a highly labor-intensive crop that needed many slaves to grow and pick the cotton. But what made it highly unprofitable and pesky was the extra labor needed to meticulously pick the cotton seeds out of the fibers by hand. And if you hadn't known by now, cotton balls are very sticky, which makes it an especially time-consuming process. One slave could only clean 1 pound of cotton a day. So when Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin in 1793, it had revolutionized the way farmers could quickly process cotton, making it into a profitable venture. The cotton gin is basically this box that had metal spikes mounted on a rotating cylinder that could only let the cotton fibers pass through, effectively separating it from the seed. The sheer efficiency of this machine meant that 50 pounds of cotton could be cleaned in a day as opposed to just 1 pound of cotton. The yield of cotton began to double each decade, and by the mid-century, cotton comprised more than half of America's exports. That included the North, which was specializing in textile mills, which, cotton products, and the South, which actually grew the cotton. The South grew 3/4 of the world's cotton, and cotton had a major influence in politics, culture, and economy. Cotton is king. The Mississippi River became an essential trade route, with steamboats transporting bales of cotton weighing around 400 to 500 pounds. When New Orleans had been purchased by the US in 1803, alongside Louisiana, its strategic location close to the mouth of the Mississippi River and ocean meant more trading opportunity. Steamships was an invention that gained a lot of popularity due to the growing cotton kingdom. Invented in 1807 by this dude, steamships were especially used to travel past cotton plantations and down to the port in New Orleans to be shipped off to Liverpool, England. A whopping 75% of the British's cotton was supplied by the American South, and 4 million of British's population depended on the cotton textile industry. And since around 40% of exports were cotton textiles, America had bargaining power to borrow money abroad. In 1817, there were only 17 steamships in operation, but by 1837, there were over 700 steamships. By 1860, some 3,500 steamships were traveling in and out of New Orleans, carrying a cargo of goods worth $220 million, which were mostly in cotton. Joseph Holt Ingraham wrote, "Truly does New Orleans represent every other city and nation upon earth. I know of none where is congregated so great a variety of the human species." Ah yes, the cotton and the steamship has transformed this New Orleans into a hub of commerce that... a variety of human species. Ah yes, I forgot to mention that New Orleans had the largest slave trade in the US. Ah, the slave trade. Remember how cotton was a highly labor-intensive crop, similar to tobacco, and how wheat was grown instead? Well, observers of the period believed that slavery would be a dying constitution and would no longer be in practice, especially under the new U.S. Constitution in 1787, when the founders agreed to end slavery by banning the foreign slave trade. Interest in liberty and freedom was high, while profits continued to decline in slavery. In fact, because farmers did not need so many slaves due to the lower demand for tobacco, the excess slaves were thus considered a hassle due to the extra amounts to feed, shelter, and clothes. So there were slaveholders that were selling off excess slaves, or some that even freed them. But thanks to the cotton gin, it revitalized the slave trade. The cotton gin only did the hard part of cleaning the cotton. But cotton was still considered a labor-intensive crop that needed many slaves to cultivate and pick the cotton. The textiles mills of the North and Great Britain kept the demand for cotton high, which encouraged farmers to continue expanding land, buy more slaves, to grow the cotton, and sell cotton, and then rinse and repeat. Slaves became the foundation of the cotton kingdom, so much so that slavery became an obsession in the South. In 1834, Joseph Ingraham described the culture of the South as to sell cotton in order to buy Negroes, to make more cotton to buy more Negroes. Ad infinitum is the aim and direct tendency of all the operations of the thoroughgoing cotton planter, his whole soul wrapped up in the pursuit. The number of slaves in America grew from 700,000 in 1790 to 4 million in 1860, and the value of slaves also increased. Although the South was obsessed with slavery, the North had their own opinion. Sold Down the River, a quote from Uncle Tom's Cabin, was a Northerner's insight and opinion of the slave trade in the South. The book explored the cruelties of slavery, focusing on families being separated and treated like property. The author Harriet Beecher Stowe was a great advocate against slavery as she traveled across the US and Europe to help convince against it. Tensions grew against the free states and the slave states, and when she met with President Lincoln, he said, "So you're the little woman who wrote the book and made this great war." Oh, spoiler alert. Solomon Northup was a free black man living in Saratoga, New York, when he was kidnapped and sold into slavery in 1841. This excerpt derives from Northup's description of being sold in New Orleans, alongside with fellow slave Eliza and her children Randall and Emily. Anyhow, European alliances supported the American anti-slavery movement. To show you the growing opposition of slavery, here's a pro-slavery cartoon that was posted in response from the South to the anti-slave movement. Here you can see a depiction of the satisfied and happy slaves in the South, while in Britain, workers in factories had worse hardship than the Southern slaves. Which I mean, fair game, but still, the sheer ignorance! Anyhow, James Henry Hammond, a politician hailing from the South Carolina, delivered a speech at Washington, D.C. in 1858, boasting how there's no way the North would make war on us. Because, we sent them $30 million worth of cotton. Cotton is king. So what if we disagree on slavery? Oh, would you look at that? The Civil War. Fun fact, they lived in a time called the antebellum period, which means before the war in Latin, so yeah. Cotton also has a heavy toll on the environment. Back to the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, more lands with nutrient soil meant farmers could grow more, you guessed it, cotton. In the US history textbook by P. Scott Corbett, he described it as entire old-growth forest and cypress swamps fell to the axe as slaves labored to strip the vegetation to make way for cotton. Not only that, but to ambitious white planters, the extent of new land available for cotton production seemed almost limitless, and many planters simply leapfrogged from one area to the next, abandoning their fields every 10 to 15 years after the soil had become exhausted. Even up till now, cotton remains a resource-intensive crop, needing bountiful land and water to grow it. Cotton requires about 7.8 million liters per hectare to grow. As you can see in this graph, cotton uses up the most water in the Murray-Darling Basin compared to other crops. The devastating impact on the Murray-Darling Basin, such as droughts, toxic algae blooms, and widespread fish deaths, have been linked towards the unsustainable usage of water by farmers. Even in other countries like the Pakistan Indus River are affected by crops like cotton, with 97% of water going to cultivating it. 16% of the world's insecticide and 10% of the world's pesticides are gone towards cotton. 77 million workers are poisoned annually, and runoffs by the pesticides used to grow cotton can contaminate water sources and affect biodiversity. 16 states in the US reported that they found aldicarb in their groundwater, a very poisonous insecticide used in cotton. Fortunately, we have become more aware of the unsustainable growing practices of cotton and have developed methods such as organic cotton, which uses crop rotation to allow the soil to regenerate, uses up to 91% less water than conventional cotton, and uses no pesticides. Slavery has become a thing of the past since it was banned after the Civil War, and machinery have been developed to replace cotton pickers and other labor associated with it. Here you can see a cotton gin still being used today, but now it's fully automated and doesn't require someone to crank the machine. As consumers, we can do our role by supporting and buying from fashion brands that uses organic cotton.